announcement about the future of more than 24 migrant shelters in the city. Today, Mayor Adams announcing 25 of them are slated to close in the next 2 months.
The reason? The city says the number of people staying in the shelters has been...
So, as of October 31st, New York had 212 asylum shelters scattered throughout the city, but it looks like that's about to change, as the city just did a major 180 and announced plans to shut 25 of them. However, this sudden announcement has shelter residents terrified, worried about whether or not New York will remain a sanctuary city, because New York's mayor has indicated he wants that to change as well.
News Nation is now confirming some migrants are starting to leave on their own, attempting to self-deport ahead of the second Trump presidency.
A sense of nervousness and uncertainty among the migrant families staying at Floyd Bennett Field. The city announcing Tuesday they are closing 25 migrant shelters in the coming 2 months.
Emily McKenzie, who works in Manhattan, says she's felt a tangible difference over the last 2 years as more and more migrant shelters sprang up. She blames federal and local officials for allowing things to get out of control.
At the peak 17 months ago, the city was welcoming 4,000 migrants per week, but things have dramatically changed. Last week, less than 400 showed up and about 1,000 left.
Migrants who are going through their asylum proceedings are actually cutting things short on their own, and they're finding ports of entry and they're trying to leave ahead of the possibility of Trump removing them.
We don't know what he will decide to do. We are all waiting. Many of us are afraid.
So the asylum crisis in New York is changing in ways nobody could have predicted. But what you're not being told is that although a majority of New York State residents say they support President Trump's immigration plans, New York City's progressive city council does not. And this city is about to become a battleground where a civil war of sorts over immigration policy plays out, as the mayor tries to carry out policies the majority now say they're in favor of without the approval of local lawmakers who are proud of our sanctuary city status and will stop at nothing to make sure it survives long into the future, even if it doesn't actually help people. Because law-abiding immigrants, which include asylum seekers with a legal right to remain in America while their court case plays out, do not benefit from a sanctuary city. They can reside anywhere they want without fear of deportation. But that's not the case for gang members, criminals, terror watch list suspects, and anyone else the federal government has ordered to leave the country but has refused to do so. And with rising crime sweeping over our city, where sanctuary policies allow unknown numbers of Trendy Aragua gang members to reside in our shelters, more and more people are realizing what a bad deal sanctuary city status is for everyone who's not a criminal. And that brings us to the real reason why our shelters are now shutting down. They're failing in their mission to help people, as many of them are dangerous, and the number of asylum seekers traveling to New York who even need a shelter has dropped drastically. And we're now at a point where more people leave our shelters and our city than enter it. A surprising turn of events considering the president, who's promised to overhaul U.S. immigration policy, hasn't even taken office yet, and our border policies haven't changed a whole lot in the last few months. And as you're about to see, that's causing some people worried about future deportations to pack their bags and leave New York voluntarily. So right over here, this is the Row Hotel. It's one of the city's shelters reserved for families. It's got over 1,000 rooms, and it's not one of the facilities that is on the list to be shut down. However, activists are saying that since New York City maintains 2 separate shelter systems, one for asylum seekers and one for homeless individuals who are not here seeking asylum, that it probably should be shut down because it may put people at risk for deportation, because a place like this is highly visible and federal agents could set up shop around here and carry out plans they say our sanctuary city policies were designed to stop.
We think it's safer for clients to be in Department of Homeless Services shelter sites rather than to be in these very publicly known sites that are just for new arrivals, putting them at risk potentially for ICE to find them.
So you could see the entrance to this shelter right here behind me, and activists, they make a good point. If these 2 systems, the shelter system for asylum seekers and other individuals, remain separate, the federal government, if it tries to carry out a deportation agenda, will have an easier time of it. They would prefer new arrivals to live among the general homeless population, which would make it harder for federal authorities to locate them. system. But what they don't understand is all that's going to do is protect criminals, some of whom are gang members residing in these very same facilities. They're not making the world a better place. But the problem for those criminals is if they live in highly visible locations, it's going to be very easy for the federal government to track them down. If they don't leave and go into hiding, which there is speculation many are doing, if they think a deportation program might be a problem for them. Think about that. Why would you stay in a place that has been reported as possibly housing those who might be involved in criminal activity after the new president takes over, while the mayor is trying to roll back sanctuary city policies that you might have been benefiting from? And the way those policies work now is that police are not allowed inside these facilities. Yes, there's a police car parked out front, but that's as close as it can get. And if the police think there's criminal activity taking place in one of these facilities, they can't just go in and try to put a stop to it. No, they can only go in if they've got a specific warrant for a specific individual. And with as much press as all of this shelter-related gang activity is getting, you can bet that when things transition to a new president in the near future, the way the asylum shelters here are monitored will probably change. And if people are smart, they'll leave on their own before that happens, and some of them are. But the whole reason we're even having this conversation is because for the last year, New York was America's sanctuary city capital, and over 220,000 people have come through here because of our generous right to shelter rules that will house anyone who asks. But because our shelter system doesn't do any background checks, this has allowed criminals who are not well-meaning to sneak in to these places and start ruining the lives of their fellow immigrants. But even though the city council is against the mayor's plans to make any changes to the way things work around here, recent polling suggests that a majority of the electorate might be behind such changes that would get criminals out of our city who are potentially dangerous. And the reason that matters is because next year there's going to be another election in New York.
A majority of New York voters, 54 to 35%, say that they think the state should support President-elect Donald Trump's efforts to deport migrants living here illegally. That includes 87% of Republicans and 54% of independents.
Democrats disagree, but not as strong as some might anticipate.
So, two things should become very clear from this. First, New York's sanctuary city policies, those are now seen as bad news by a majority of people who live here. And second, a majority of people seem to be in favor of a plan that would remove criminals from our city and make it safer. Now, this news report goes on to discuss how, from a numbers perspective, the asylum crisis has actually improved. There are less asylum seekers in the city's care now than there have been in a long time. But that's not what people are concerned about. They're concerned about gang activity. They're concerned about rising violence. And it makes sense that that has lagged behind the numbers related to the asylum crisis. And that's because when the asylum crisis here began, you didn't immediately have gang activity. It took time for gang members to infiltrate that system and come here and start recruiting and setting up their operations, and then to get the tools and the resources they needed to go out and commit crime. And now we're seeing that all over town. We're seeing it in middle-class neighborhoods with criminal activity all over the sidewalks in some places, with people being forced to sell stolen goods right on the side of the street. But as this article discusses, shutting down shelters will not get rid of gang activity here because this is still a sanctuary city. And as long as those laws remain, New York will be a magnet for people who want to hide from the federal government. They just might not want to do it inside of a very visible, prominent facility like this.
Darimar Almanzar came from Venezuela with her 2 sons and partner 3 months ago. She says she was just notified that come January 15th, everyone here will be moved. We don't know what he will decide to do. We are all waiting. Many of us are afraid. The city's lease with the federal...
So here we've got interviews with 2 shelter residents. First, we've got a woman who's upset and kind of scared because she and her family might be relocated to another facility. And then we've got this man who says that he's afraid because of him, probably referring to the incoming president. But why would someone be afraid of the incoming president if they're here in a law-abiding capacity? If someone is not here in a law-abiding capacity, they might have something to worry about. But if they're here and they're doing the right thing and they're not part of a gang, then they shouldn't. However, there's speculation that not everyone who's come here and applied for asylum has done so in a legitimate manner. And there could be people who have a feeling their claim is going to get denied. And those could be people who are potentially nervous about new plans. But the woman, she's currently living in one of the tent shelters. Her life is actually about to get better if the city relocates her. She's living at the Floyd Bennett Field facility, which nobody wanted to live in when it was first opened and which activists protested was inhumane. It's literally a system of tents out on an old airfield. Nobody wants to live there. It floods. New York City's Randall's Island tent shelters have a similar problem. Those are in the process of being closed as well right now. And if people end up getting relocated to facilities like this hotel, which are cheaper for the city to operate, they won't have to live in a tent in a field anymore. And if any criminals living in a place like this are also removed from it, the place will be better equipped to benefit those who it was designed for. But now New York City finds itself in a very strange place with regards to the asylum crisis because removing criminals from a sanctuary city is near impossible. And now the city finds itself with a mayor who wants to make that possible, a city council that doesn't, and an incoming president who says that all of these laws are illegal. And right now, everyone's wondering what's going to happen next. So the new border czar has come out and has said that if there's a sanctuary city like Denver, New York, or Chicago, and that city is run by people who don't want to cooperate with the new federal plan for immigration in this country, more ICE agents and resources will be deployed to such a place. And that right there could be enough to get many people who are here right now and think that that might be a problem for them in the future to leave. On top of that, about a month and a half ago, ICE was only reported to have around 6,000 agents. Apparently, they'd need around 100,000 to carry out some of these plans, which is why they're going to give priority to criminals and dangerous individuals. However, it looks like in the near future, they might be getting some help from New York City in a way that other sanctuary cities like Chicago and Denver won't be assisting.
For Mayor Adams, the issue is crystal clear.
People who are violent to New Yorkers should not be allowed to stay in our city.
The mayor calling on the city council to amend the sanctuary laws so that the NYPD can notify immigration and customs agents about violent crimes committed by migrants.
Can anyone tell me what's controversial about that? If someone's in a gang or they're out committing crimes, should they be allowed to stay in New York City? Really? Should they get to keep their right to shelter, which New York offers to everybody, no matter who they are or where they're from? Or should that be a privilege only reserved for those who aren't out committing crime? And this is that civil war that I was just talking about. Apparently, some people think this is very controversial, and these protests recently took place in Albany, where the governor is. Now, keep in mind that when a hotel or shelter closes, the residents are not made homeless. Instead, they are relocated to other shelters, and as always, people are offered free tickets to other parts of the country or the world by plane or by bus from the city itself. The city is not trying to keep people in New York City who do not wish to remain in New York City, that's for sure. Yet somehow people have decided that removing anyone from a shelter is some grievous sin and is a bad thing to do, even if that person is not making the world a better place.
But it's not as simple as that. The mayor and law enforcement officials say they're not allowed to contact ICE agents to report crimes that have been committed.
If we're not cooperating and the sanctuary policies do not allow NYPD to cooperate with my staff, so then how are we able to keep the community safe?
Yes, that is a big question, especially considering how lax New York's justice system is and how it's already decriminalized minor crimes like misdemeanor shoplifting under $1,000 and also certain types of assault. If you've got gang members or dangerous individuals who get arrested in New York, there's a good chance they'll get released without bail and be free until their court date, which nobody can force them to show up to. They'll just have to appear on their own because they aren't in jail and they posted no bail. And that's why the mayor is out saying he wants to roll back certain sanctuary city policies. Our current justice system is inadequate for getting any criminal off the streets. And right now, it prevents police from calling their counterparts at ICE when they pick up somebody who is dangerous and letting them know they can come peacefully get that person from NYPD custody. And you know what? Removing dangerous criminals from New York City, that's not going to stop our crime problems. Those are still going to continue, but it would definitely be a step in the right direction, that's for sure. Because right now, we've got gang members racking up hundreds of arrests, yet nobody's been deported. That doesn't make sense. And it makes you wonder exactly which communities are being made safer because of these policies. Certainly not immigrant communities, that's for sure. And oftentimes, it's immigrant communities that suffer the most at the hands of these criminals.
We've got one guy here who committed 22 crimes. In 6 months, our cops are getting beaten up.
Now, the Legal Aid Society condemned the mayor's call to roll back the sanctuary laws, saying it's xenophobic and that it serves to...
So here we've got evidence that these policies are not working, and the only retort to it is just name calling? Really? It looks like everyone's forgotten that nearly a month ago, in a very large immigrant community in Queens, police launched a massive crackdown to get rid of crime and illegal activity that was taking over the neighborhood. This operation is still taking place, and it involves multiple city agencies that are gonna move in to Queens, set up camp, and not leave until crime has been eradicated. And there's no other part of New York City where you'll see men drag briefcases out of vans and hand them to women who then start selling tools from Home Depot on the side of the street. A lot of these products still have the tags attached to them from the very stores that they came out of. Plus, you've got some vehicles that are set up like miniature stores. They've got their doors open, there's people selling stuff out of the back. They can just close their doors and drive away when the police show up. And local officials say this Tren de Aragua gang that started in Venezuela has their fingerprints all over the crime taking place in that very part of town. It would almost be anti-immigrant to let these criminals who are hurting immigrant communities remain. Yet we've got this idea that somehow law enforcement and immigration are toxic to one another. Which raises a big question. Do our local leaders even realize that when they come out in favor of sanctuary city policies, what they're really doing is coming out in favor of policies that support criminal activity? Or do they just dislike the new president and his immigration plans so much that they're willing to support just about anything, even if it doesn't keep people safe? What do you think about that? Should Mayor Adams, who used to be a Republican a very long time ago, should he roll back these sanctuary city laws that many people say are making the city more dangerous? Let me know what you think. Thank you so much. I will see you in the next video.